Good morning. This is the morning from the New York Times for Thursday, August 13, 2026. I'm Matthew Cullen, filling in for Sam Sifton, and we have a packed edition today, from a celestial spectacle that drew millions of Europeans skyward, to a stunning shakeup in NBA ownership, to a trio of executions not seen in over a decade. Let's begin. Yesterday, the moon devoured the sun. It was Europe's first total solar eclipse in decades, a rare collective experience for almost everyone along the viewing path. Our science reporter Katrina Miller puts it beautifully: totality is a cosmic coincidence. Our moon is about 400 times smaller than the sun, but it's also 400 times closer to Earth. This makes the two appear to be the same size from our point of view. The sun, moon, and Earth are locked in a gravitational dance around one another, and when these three align, we bear witness to a solar eclipse. That's what happened yesterday in parts of Europe. Millions of people looked up to see the moon devour the sun, briefly turning the star that gives us life into a hazy glowing ring in the sky. Day suddenly turned to dark. The air cooled. Crowds cheered. Birds started shrieking. Then, just a couple of minutes later, everything returned to normal. True totality, the eerie, fleeting event where the sun and the moon perfectly align, could be seen in remote Greenland, in the cliff towns of Iceland, and in parts of Spain. Our colleagues were there. On Iceland's west coast, the clouds parted just enough to allow a glimpse. First, the sun narrowed to a sliver, like a French tip on a celestial manicure. Then, it was suddenly twilight. In the Spanish heartland, where large crowds gathered in normally empty towns, excited visitors chanted "now, now, now," as the moon took its first nibble. In Mallorca, the moment of totality arrived just before sundown, making it feel even more dramatic. An optical illusion causes the sun to look much larger as it nears the horizon, where the Earth's atmosphere also shifts the color of the light. Our colleague Jason Carrion, who was in Mallorca, noticed a restaurant offering a burger with a side of eclipse-watching glasses for about $23. Eclipses are special because they're rare. The United States, for instance, won't see a coast-to-coast eclipse until 2045. As Katrina put it, it offers a primal sense of what it means to be human, through shared despair and delight under a celestial rebirth. We are also consumed by our problems on the ground. Sometimes, we need a reason to look up. And for a bit of history, during the last total solar eclipse visible from Spain, in 1905, the U.S. Navy sent warships, the USS Minneapolis, USS Columbia, and USS Dixie, to take high-definition photographs with one of the largest cameras then constructed, a lens worth about $900 then, roughly $34,000 today. They called it the Eclipse Squadron. Now, a single image from a very different event. In Colombia, a recent earthquake hit the city of Cali particularly hard. Officials feared that more than 200 people were trapped alive under the rubble there as of Tuesday. This photograph shows the rescue of one survivor, Diana Marcela Troncoso, 31, who was trapped for almost 30 hours. She gripped the arm of a Colombian firefighter like a lifeline. As rescuers worked to free her, a police doctor, Claudia Milanes, monitored Ms. Troncoso's vital signs, making sure she was hydrated. At least 181 people died in Colombia after the quake. But not Ms. Troncoso. Diana. Diana, the crowd chanted as she was carried out. Some applauded. In Cali, mountains of debris are now commonplace. Many people are still missing. Military forces were deployed to help civil authorities cordon off the hardest-hit cities and coordinate the search for survivors. But ordinary citizens pitched in, too, mobilizing to gather supplies, food, and hydration for those affected. Turning to immigration, where the Trump administration has several major developments. First, the Department of Homeland Security plans to spend millions of dollars equipping immigration officers with gloves that can deliver electric shocks. DHS described the gloves as a de-escalation device, but critics have expressed alarm over equipping immigration agents with another tool that they say could actually escalate their use of force. The plans have also drawn concern from some former immigration and customs enforcement officials who have questioned the use of such gloves against people accused of violating immigration laws, which are mostly civil offenses. Second, a third immigrant held at a troubled Newark detention facility has died after suffering a medical emergency. A Guatemalan immigrant, Jose Shajan Raxon, had been taken to Delaney Hall, which reopened in May 2025 as part of the Trump administration's immigration crackdown on July 18. He experienced what appeared to be a seizure, was transferred to a hospital, and died. New Jersey's Attorney General opened a civil rights investigation into the facility last week, This is the third death at Delaney Hall since it reopened. Third, a Times exclusive, the Homeland Security Department used a no-bid contract to buy 10 used jets that it said were urgently needed for deportation flights. They've sat idle for months. Starting last fall, DHS spent $464 million on a no-bid contract to buy 10 used airplanes from a firm in Northern Virginia. The department said it had no time to consider other offers, the planes were needed urgently for deportation flights. But flight tracking data shows the fleet has largely sat idle. Reporters David Farenthold, Andrea Fuller, Julie Tate, Nicholas Nehamas, and Hamed El-Aziz examined contracting records and internal documents to uncover this. In politics, a remarkable story about President Trump's movements. When President Trump covertly left Air Force One before a flight out of Turkey last month, some members of his inner circle, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, remained on the plane. It was a clandestine operation. Trump sneaked out of Turkey in a catering container aboard a military jet, a stunning episode of official deception. White House aides Natalie Harp, Dan Scavino, and Walt Nauta, as well as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, were all traveling with the president on that secret military jet. Meanwhile, Rubio and Bessent left on the decoy flight, an older model of Air Force One, which carried other aides who had been attending the NATO summit in Ankara. Our former Moscow bureau chief Anton Troyanovsky writes that Trump's Air Force One subterfuge pales in comparison to the secrecy surrounding Vladimir Putin, whose activity is shrouded in so much mystery that journalists have tried to track it by assessing the wilting of his office plants. Also in the White House, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt will step down at the end of the month. Leavitt recently had a second child, and Trump said she was leaving to spend more time with her family. In a social media post, Trump said Leavitt, who recently returned from maternity leave, would leave at the end of the month to spend time with her young children, a decision he said he totally understands and respects. He said she would become one of his top outside advisors and called her one of the best White House press secretaries ever. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, meanwhile, urged Latin American military leaders gathered in Panama to join U.S. efforts against drug cartels. He said the coalition's motto would be, "We do bad things to bad people." Speaking to civilian defense leaders and top generals from 18 other countries at a meeting of a U.S.-led counter-cartel coalition, Hegseth doubled down on the Trump administration's pledge to use military force in addition to law enforcement measures to combat drug traffickers. The collective goal, he said, is to degrade, dismantle, and ultimately destroy the cartels. On the financial front, the Trump administration said it would not enforce corporate reporting requirements designed to target money laundering. The Treasury Department said late Tuesday it was permanently halting the collection of data about the ownership of private American companies required under the 2021 Corporate Transparency Act. The law, which passed with bipartisan support, was intended to crack down on shell companies used by criminals to launder money and traffic drugs. The initiative follows a years-long campaign by lobbying groups, which contended the requirements were too onerous for businesses. And on guns, the Justice Department allowed parts of a major 1934 gun control law to lapse, ending federal restrictions on short-barreled guns and suppressors. Judge James Wesley Hendricks of the Northern District of Texas had said his order striking down the mandated permitting process under the National Firearms Act as unconstitutional would go into effect Thursday unless the Justice Department appealed. Trump administration officials didn't file an appeal before the deadline. In effect, the administration stepped aside and let a pillar of the Prohibition-era National Firearms Act lapse. Health news now. Lancaster County in Pennsylvania is now at the center of a major measles outbreak. 5 years ago, before he was health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. visited the county and told a crowd that the cure for measles was chicken soup and vitamin A. Pressed recently on whether he might accept responsibility for the resurgence of measles in the country, Kennedy fended off any suggestion that his history of promoting vaccine skepticism might be partly to blame. The groups facing these outbreaks were almost all religious communities that just don't vaccinate, he told CNN's Dana Bash. It's hard to blame that on me. Local officials are now racing to contain one of the largest outbreaks in the country. And a dramatic surrogacy case in Texas. A surrogate who refused a request from the intended parents to abort a fetus with a heart defect gave birth this week. The baby, born Wednesday with a severe heart defect, drew the attention of anti-abortion activists and the Texas Attorney General after the intended parents wanted the surrogate mother to have an abortion. The surrogate, McKenna West, received legal representation from anti-abortion activists who helped her travel to Texas for medical care. Ken Paxton, the state's attorney general, intervened to compel medical care for the newborn. The bitter confrontation over surrogacy, abortion, and parental rights stretched across 3 states before culminating at a Dallas hospital. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has spent nearly a decade in the public eye, but the spotlight has rarely fallen on her personal life. That changed this week, after she announced that she was freezing her eggs. TMZ revealed that she had broken up with her fiancé. Ocasio-Cortez's decision to publicize her egg freezing resonated with women who had made the same decision. "I just love that she's making it public," one woman told The Times. "I think women, the more we share, the better it is." Since she won her first election in 2018 at 28, becoming the youngest woman ever elected to Congress, Ocasio-Cortez has been a political obsession for fans to adore and critics to abhor. Her body, her weight, the clothes she wore, her lipstick, her endorsements, her Met Gala appearance and attacks the rich gown all have been parsed and picked apart in ways she has described as sometimes dehumanizing. Now, with big choices ahead, including talk of a presidential run, she's navigating new territory. Many women say being open about fertility treatment is a form of empowerment. But critics say all the talk can be misleading. 8 years ago, Meg Quinn decided not to share the details of her egg freezing. She was 37 and just out of a long-term relationship when she started panicking. "It was hard to talk about," she said. "There were so many different ways that it could go. Like, you could spend all this money and it could be for nothing." Now 45, she says she wishes someone like Ocasio-Cortez had been public about it then. Around the world, 2 Palestinian families in the West Bank have been trapped in their homes for days, under siege from Israeli settlers. Since Sunday, about 10 to 15 settlers have been attacking them around the clock, throwing stones and an axe, and even set up a tent in the front yard of one of the houses. Early Wednesday morning, after news of the siege began to draw attention, the Israeli military arrived. The siege casts a spotlight on the army's struggle to curtail settler violence and protect Palestinians living in the occupied West Bank. In Britain, Nigel Farage, a populist right-wing leader, is running in a special election today. He forced a new election in his parliamentary seat after coming under pressure over his finances. His main challenger is a man who dresses as an intergalactic trash can, Count Binface, a novelty candidate who claims to be an intergalactic space warrior from the planet Sigma Octantis 4. Our reporter Amelia Nierenberg interviewed Count Binface in London and reported from Clacton-on-Sea. "Shall we do a little flowchart?" Count Binface asked, gesturing with gloved fingers. "If he wins, he wins. If he loses, he still wins because he got his message out. If he comes second, he humiliates Farage. It's a headline-grabbing spectacle in a serious election." Other big stories: 3 states plan to execute inmates today. It would be the first time in more than a decade that 3 people on death row were killed on the same day. Alabama, Tennessee, and Oklahoma each executed an inmate Thursday morning using lethal injection. Each of the 3 men had been convicted of murder. Nationally, states are on track to execute far fewer people in 2026 than in previous years. Public support for capital punishment is at its lowest level in decades, according to Gallup polls, even as the Trump administration has called the death penalty an essential tool for deterring and punishing horrific crimes. And in Georgia, former sheriff's deputies have been arrested on charges of using flock cameras to stalk people. 3 former Bibb County deputies were arrested this week amid a growing national debate over flock cameras, license plate readers found on roads in every state but Alaska. An internal audit conducted with help from Flock revealed the deputies had used the camera system's license plate data for personal, non-law enforcement purposes. All 3 were involved in separate incidents tracking people with whom they had a personal relationship at the time. Opinion Pages today, M. Gesson argues that a new law has criminalized trans life in Kansas, writing, "This is what fascism looks like." And Peter Navarro, a White House trade advisor, writes that Trump is putting an end to a lucrative overseas shipping scam. Navarro describes how a recliner made in Vietnam gets its motor from China finished, branded, and boxed, shipped by the container load from a factory in the same corporate family. Workers unbox it, bolt it into the recliner, and within 90 days the recliner sails from Vung Tau to Norfolk, Virginia, where the Chinese mechanism is declared as Vietnamese, erasing 25 percentage points of American tariff. Morning reads, 3 stories we've made free for you. First, No Way Out. Roberto Mosquera was deported from the United States to Eswatini, an African country he'd never heard of. He may never go free. Second, Sound of Silence. Meet the filmmakers who think silent movies are the best way to make themselves heard. At a one-night festival on an uninhabited island in the Hudson River, Palapel Island, home to Bannerman Castle, moviegoers rode a ferry to watch 7 new shorts that paid tribute to the kind of entertainment that was all the rage before talkies arrived. Norma Desmond would have approved. Third, India's most livable city, one state leader has set out to build it, no easy task in a country known for poor infrastructure and high pollution. Today's emoji, according to data from Google, the most popular emoji worldwide last year was the loudly crying face, you know the one, with the tears streaming down. It rose from 4th place, leapfrogging the rolling on the floor laughing face, the face with tears of joy, and the red heart. Texters, especially young ones, deploy it when something is so funny, emotional, or embarrassing you could cry. Now, a stunning sports story, the Los Angeles Lakers are being sold again. Just over a year after buying the Lakers at a record-setting valuation of $10 billion, Mark Walter agreed to sell the team to Bob Iger, the former Disney CEO, and Joshua Kushner, the brother of Trump's son-in-law Jared, at a $12.5 billion valuation. The deal is for Walter's shares in the Lakers and does not affect his ownership of the Dodgers or Sparks. Kushner will have to sell his minority share in the Miami Heat. The Lakers set an NBA record with a $10 billion valuation last year. This sale would reportedly value the team at $12.5 billion. It's a stunning development for one of the NBA's marquee franchises, entering a period of uncertainty with Joshua Kushner and Bob Iger, both relative newcomers to sports ownership. From what we're told, the sale is for Walter's shares in the Lakers. It doesn't affect Walter's ownership of the Los Angeles Sparks, and it doesn't affect the Dodgers. Stan Kasten, the Dodgers president and CEO, told reporters, "This is a Lakers story. It's not really a Dodgers story. They're completely separate. So there are no changes here." Walter's continued control of the Dodgers is a positive sign for the team's ability to keep the superstar Shohei Ohtani. Recipe of the day, a contender for the perfect summer dinner. This one-pan salmon recipe makes the most of ripe, bursting tomatoes. Sear the fish in butter, then grate tomatoes coarsely and pour them in for a low-effort sauce that is sweet and tangy. Pair the dish with a glass of white wine. Our critic recommends 12 bottles for summer, light in weight and texture, whether red, white, or rose. It's not the color that matters in hot weather, but the weight. The Bard in summer. Our music critic Lindsay Zoladz is having a Bob Dylan summer. She's reading 2 new books about less heralded parts of his career, one on his musical output since the 1990s, the other on his foray into filmmaking. And she saw him play live, at age 85, on his long hot summer tour. There was such a relaxed virtuosity to the whole performance, she writes. Robert Polito's After the Flood, Inside Bob Dylan's Memory Palace, considers the remarkable creative renaissance of Dylan's last 30 or so years. The other book, by Paul Schrader, examines Dylan's filmmaking. For her newsletter, The Amplifier, Lindsay made a playlist of Dylan songs inspired by the books and the concert. Pop it on and have your own Bob Dylan summer. More on culture. For decades, art experts insisted that the fragile, centuries-old Bayeux Tapestry could never leave France. Now it's in London. Political will, cutting-edge engineering, and unorthodox diplomacy proved them wrong. The 220-foot-long embroidery depicting the 1066 invasion of England by William the Conqueror had resided in Bayeux, France, for over 900 years. When Elizabeth II was about to be crowned in 1953, British officials decided on the perfect gift. They would bring home the Bayeux Tapestry. It took 70 years, but it finally happened. A video of the pop star Tate McRae with Neutrogena skin care products has led to a wave of parodies on TikTok. In the ad, McRae demonstrates her post-show routine on a private jet headed to Lollapalooza. There's just one problem: she appears to barely touch her face with the products. A makeup wipe grazes her skin, seemingly leaving her face as made up as when she began. The video has been viewed at least 18 million times and inspired a genre of parody videos. And late-night hosts question Trump's decision to leave some of his staff on Air Force One. Anthony Anderson, the guest host of Jimmy Kimmel Live, called the ruse in which President Trump exited the plane in a catering container Operation Pig in a blanket. Of course, all the people who were left on the plane are furious, Anderson joked. Trump hasn't felt heat like this since he locked himself in a bathroom with a hamburger. The Morning recommends, eat more zucchini. It can improve your metabolism. Protect your eyes. Here's what ophthalmologists wish you knew. For starters, they can get sunburned. When you expose your eyes to prolonged or intense UV light, you can develop photokeratitis, which is basically sunburn of the cornea. And your pick, the most clicked link in The Morning yesterday, gave tips for making the most of a small kitchen space. Games, here is today's spelling bee. Yesterday's pangram was weighty. And here are today's mini crossword, Wordle, connections, crossplay, and strands. Thanks for spending part of your morning with the Times. Sam Sifton is back next week. This has been the morning for August 13th, 2026. Have a good day.